Hello, I'm in my garden, so I'm just collecting some seeds that were flowers earlier on in the year that were particularly good for bees. And this is a plant called red campion, which is really good for bees. So this time of the year I go round my garden, just collecting seeds ready so that I can sow them again in the spring. So I'm just going to tip these out and see how many seeds we've got. Wow, look at that, there's loads. I'm Nige, by the way, and I'm from Artecology, part of the team that worked in the Glades shopping centre on the Wild Glades project. And a lot of the work that we did there was for bees, but not just honeybees that kind of most people think of. We like to work for the nearly 250, I think it's actually more than 250 different types of native bees that aren't honeybees. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today and show you some top tips for inviting native species of bees into your schools and gardens. So in my garden I grow not just flowers, there is fruit and veg as well, but of course they all started as flowers, and all of the fruit and veg that's in my garden were all pollinated. All those flowers were pollinated by bees of different types, honeybees and bumblebees and solitary bees. So this raspberry, which is a lovely raspberry plant, and it doesn't have red raspberries but it has these beautiful gold ones. They're absolutely delicious. Every single raspberry on this bush was pollinated by a bee, and that's why they're so important. We've got blackberries in the garden and apples as well, and tomatoes, and they've all been pollinated by bees. So that makes them pretty important, I think. So this is a chunk of wood we call a biototem, and you can see these in the on the green roof at the Glades shopping centre, because we made some and we put some there. And these are designed specifically for our native solitary bees. So each one of these holes is potentially a home for a different kind of solitary bee, and I've actually got two types that have made nests in these. Now remember, these aren't like big honeybee nests. They don't have thousands of bees in one place. There's just one nest per hole, and that'll have a few little tiny eggs in that will turn into bee grubs and then eventually into bee adults. And I've got two types. There's this one here, which is a red mason bee, and they use like a wax to seal up the hole once they've gone inside and laid their eggs, and that's the little bit that you can see there, the little stopper of wax. And then I've got another type, which is a leaf cutter bee, and those ones, there's one in here and there's one down here as well. They snip up little bits of leaves to block up the hole after they've laid their eggs inside the tube, and they also make like little cells out of the cut leaves. Now I actually watched these making these plugs, because they like to cut certain types of plants to make these plugs, and one of them is a rose bush, and I've got a rambling rose that's just growing up in part of my garden, and I watched the bee doing that work, snipping it up into little tiny bits. They do it so quickly, and then they fly just the short distance from the rose bush to here and plug up these holes. So this is something that anyone can do. You can do this. It doesn't need to be a biototem. It can be any kind of piece of wood, even a fence post, and you can drill holes into it just like we've done here. Lots of different sizes, because the native bees come in different sizes, different species of different sizes, and we've gone from 5mm wide holes to up to 10mm wide holes, and more or less everything in between. And the bees will find those little places and spaces and those little holes. You want them to go down about the length of the drill, really, about that deep, about 100mm deep, and then they'll go down, they'll right to the bottom, they'll lay an egg, they'll seal that one in, and then they'll go down again and they'll lay another egg and they'll seal that one in, and they work their way all the way to the front until eventually, depending on the species, they either seal it up with wax or they seal it up with leaves. It really, really works, so it's a top tip. Bits of wood with drilled holes in. As well as drilling holes in bits of wood for these solitary bees to be able to nest in the bits of wood, there's another thing you can do for a different kind of solitary bee, and that's making piles of sandy soil or even just sand. So it's very simple. Just get a wheelbarrow full of sand from somewhere. Builder sand's pretty good, the stuff you can get in builder stores, and then pile it up, pat it down tight so that it's, so it doesn't just all blow away. And with any luck, what you'll find is these little bees, these little mining bees that dig down into sandy soil, will go down, and just like in the wood, they'll make their nest chambers in the sand. So very simply, with wood and sandy soil, you can get several species of solitary native bees nesting in your garden or in your school grounds, and it's really, really easy to do.